I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but there was sort of that mentality in high school that, these are your best years. This is culminating to something huge. Your high school years are your most important formative years where you develop as an individual and as an adult, and this is going to determine the rest of your life. And I just kind of remember that mentality when I was in high school. That's kind of what was coming from the staff and the faculty and the principal as well. So, whenever we get together for a rally, that was kind of the sense that I got. It's like, grade 12 is your last year in high school, and it's going to be your best year. And it's all culminating to something huge, big bang at the end. And that's really not what it was for me. When high school ended, it was sort of like, really, that's it? It was really anticlimactic for me. And I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but kind of what I was feeling was like, there's got to be something more than this. We studied these general studies, and we learned a little bit about life in comm class, but really not enough to bring it into the real world. And we were supposed to learn about budgeting and finding ourselves a good job that was going to pay us $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And you go out of high school, you get a job, and that's kind of the rest of your life, and that's your trajectory. And I just, somehow that didn't quite sit well with me. And maybe that's part of that is just the fact that I'm kind of a artistic type. I really love music and I love doing other creative projects. But at the end of the day, I just didn't find too many people that were thinking that way. I think they were too busy kind of, figuring out what they want to do in life, or going into university to get their, the secondary, post-secondary school and do all that kind of stuff and get a job. And so, I think ultimately the people that sort of aligned with where I was with that was my roommates. And the roommates that moved in were, either entrepreneurial minded or just didn't necessarily fit into the structure of society. I think part of it, though, in a sense, we were kind of prideful in thinking that we kind of knew better and we knew exactly what sort of path to follow, which we didn't. We started businesses and we started side projects, and ultimately we just found that we couldn't really make it a decent living without having some kind of supplemental income or some kind of real world job, whether it be kind of a part-time thing, a Starbucks, or some kind of position at a church or office job or something like that. So ultimately, we've just found that even though we thought a little bit differently than everybody else, that we still weren't exactly successful in our chosen fields. And, one of the things we did was graphic design, and another thing we did was music-related services. So we would design artwork for people, which is also graphic design, but we'd also record. It's because we started our own studio, and I still enjoy the benefits of that to this day. But really, the main thing that I took from high school, and there was really few other things, was the ability and the skill to type. And there just wasn't a whole lot else that I can really point to and say, that was it. That was the thing that really changed my life. So, what I often say now is the best education comes not through school. It's usually found outside of school. Frankly, I don't know why that is. And let me just recount my experience in Japan. I used to live in Japan for 8.5 years, so a lot of my early education in elementary and junior high school was in Japan. And we had very, very specific guidelines to follow no matter what we were doing. I seem to remember that. And so if you were in music class, nobody would just kind of leave you alone to do your own thing. Somebody would be directing you, telling you, showing you what you were supposed to be doing. Whereas the moment I came to North America, and I'm kind of painting a picture of two extremes here, which maybe it levels out somewhere in the middle, and maybe it was just my perspective at the time. But here in North America, it seems like you have to know what's going on. And if you don't know what you're doing, like in science class, what you're supposed to be doing in the next 10 minutes, you're hooped. I mean, your grades are going to be worse because you didn't follow instructions that were apparently painted clearly, but I had a hard time with that. I really had a hard time trying to figure out how to follow directions, what exactly I was supposed to be doing at any given time. And that was just really weird for me when I came to North America. Even my college experience was kind of like that, where like I didn't get my textbooks for the first 2 months because nobody told me what was supposed to be done. And what I found out later was, okay, there's a bookstore in the school where textbooks could be purchased. But the really weird thing was, as soon as I went to get my textbooks, they were all out of some of them. So I think I was able to get half or maybe 3/4 of the textbooks I needed. The other ones I had to like special order through some other bookstore. So it's just frustrating and weird experience. And that was maybe part of my upbringing, like I said, in Japan, and maybe just the differences that we have in Japan and North America. And ultimately, I feel a lot more at ease and a lot more comfortable living in Canada today than I did then. I think it's actually quite amazing, the system and the freedom and everything that we have. And I love the fact that, we kind of have this free enterprise system in North America that you can kind of start anything you want, any kind of project, and whether it succeeds or fails, that's another matter entirely. But it's sort of cool that you can take on anything that you feel like you want to do. So that's kind of what I like about North America today. And like I said, I feel more well adjusted now than when I first made my way over here. But when I first came to Canada, there was a fair bit of struggle and just trying to figure out, what's my place in this world, and why isn't anybody giving me any advice? Why isn't anybody telling me or giving me directions as to what I'm supposed to do next? I really had no idea. And so it's kind of interesting what, where I'm at today. What's interesting about that is I finally feel like I've found something where I can kind of continue my training and continue my understanding and my pursuits in life. And one of the first things I did out of high school, well, it's not one of the first things, but one of the things that I did after I finished college, not high school, after I finished college, was I did get a self-development type book, and kind of delved into that, and I related to some of it, and other parts I really wasn't sure about. I was kind of brought up conservative Christian environment, so there were some things that I was like, it's a little weird to me, and then other things I thought, this is really good. And so somewhere in my head it was that seed was planted that I needed to work on myself. And it took a while, but I did eventually find a church environment that was very supportive of that, of reading books and developing yourself and developing your talents and developing your own potential. And that's what I'm so thankful for, having found Calgary Life Church, CLC in Calgary. At first I walked in and I thought the people were so flippin' weird. I hadn't seen anything like it. I mean, they were just... They were happy, they were smiling, they were having fun, and that just didn't happen in church. That was my experience. So I just thought, these crazy people, they must be Jehovah's Witnesses or something, because oh man. But anyway, turned out that they were actually quite genuine, real happy people. And I think eventually it just kind of dawned on me that those are the kinds of people that I wanted to be around. And so when I actually had a CD of one of the pastor's sermon, and when I popped that in and listened to it, man, a switch flipped in me for sure, because I just heard him talking about, how do you get wisdom? And he talked about reading books, and he talked about finding mentorship and finding people that can help you and teach you and coach you in what you do. And it's such a different mentality from where I had just come from. It was so different from my experience. So I kind of continued to follow that self-development trail, and it became part of my life, and I just kept doing it on a consistent basis. I would delve into books, I'd read articles and blogs online, And I would also listen to podcasts and audiobooks and things like that really kind of helped me to move forward and grow and develop my potential. I think at some point it dawned on me that, leaders are readers. People who are leaders are always reading something. And that when that seed got planted and I kind of had that realization, I went out looking for books that interested me. And for some reason, I could just never really get into novels. I tried at different points, and I did eventually make my way through a few different novels, like the Hitchhiker's trilogy or saga, or whatever you want to call it. And I also did read Lord of the Rings and things like that, but just not very consistent, and I didn't like it that much. Not that they're bad books or that they were poorly written or anything like that, just that I just could not enjoy it as much. But I did find ultimately a couple of genres that did intrigue me and interest me, and one was comedy. I liked pretty much anything that Dave Barry put out, and the other was self-development. So I began on that trail, getting into more self-development material, and oh man, the things that followed, I was just struggling and wrestling with myself constantly, and I was like, why am I not good enough, and why am I not feeling fulfilled, and why can't I do the things that I say I do? And but ultimately it led to a good place, which was to start living more consciously and making more decisions consciously, more choices. I think that's one of the gifts that God gives us, is the ability to make choices in our lives. And so the end result was good, but I think the process was ugly, and I think my bandmates hated me for it, and I think a lot of relationships and friendships were strained in the process. But like I said, ultimately I feel like it was worth it, and I feel like I'm in a better place today. And so through that process, and I think you probably think at this point that I'm gonna say the key to becoming a better person, the key to understanding my place in life was self-development. And no, that's a component. That's definitely a huge part of it. And I think everybody should be plugging into podcasts and books and things that interest them, because it doesn't take long for you to become an expert. Just imagine reading something on a particular subject for 30 minutes every day. You're going to become an expert in the next 5 to 10 years. There's no question in my mind that you're going to know so much about that subject that you'll even surprise yourself, because even I have that experience where I feel like I'm far more resourceful than I ever was before. No, see, the key that I found to continuing my development was network marketing. And that may surprise you. And for some of you listening, you're going, what is network marketing? And so I think in a word, or not even in a word, but if I mention a few company names, I think it's going to start to bring a few things to mind. Melaleuca, Shackley, Mary Kay, Amway, companies like that. And which is really strange for me, because I was actually in certain organization for about 7 years, and I'm not going to tell you which one, but I already mentioned it. And I did absolutely nothing in it. I was not plugged into an upline who was actively pursuing and doing things in the business. They'd attained some success in the business, that's for sure, but it wasn't like we were in contact with them regularly, daily, weekly, monthly, barely even yearly, because they really didn't plug in. I feel like they really weren't plugged in. They'd achieved what they wanted in that business, and they weren't really in it to help others, which I'm not. It sounds like I'm maybe casting judgment. I'm not. I think it was just a system where there really wasn't any real training. There weren't people to help you along and teach you how to do things. And I've actually found it's really ironic almost, but I got out of that organization pretty recently, and I found another one that at first I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do that. But once I plugged in and I saw that the people were excited, and I saw that they were growing themselves and they were delving into material and they were getting out to seminars and they had coaching and they had mentors, they had support. A switch definitely flipped in my mind, and it really has enabled me to do things and look at things how I would never have before. I feel like I'm far more resourceful, knowledgeable when it comes to business and how to build a business correctly. And it's even given me more skills. It's given me more people skills, how to talk to people, how to come out of your own shell. And that's an ongoing thing. Nobody's perfect, and it stretches you. But having something that stretches you is not a bad thing. It having a challenge in your life. I mean, most of you, I'm sure, listening, could learn to do most jobs in 3 months to a year. And if it takes you any longer, obviously it's a job with some complexity that may be interesting. But jobs don't interest me anymore. It's not that I've worked a ton of Joe jobs. I've had a few. It's really more the fact that even as a kind of a self-employed sort of guy, there's definitely holes in what I'm doing. There's been holes all along. Income, for example, hasn't always been what I need to live. And I had the hardest time because of my self-image asking what I was worth. And I think it turned into resentment, which, you can turn it inward for a while, but it comes out. Eventually it comes out, and that resentment got turned on my students and their parents and their guardians and things like that. So it wasn't a healthy place to be. And I think I've developed my self-image to the point where I know I have a much better idea of what I'm worth. I know what to charge. I know how to make a living, and I know the things to do to get the business that I want. And some of that definitely takes work, and it takes time, it takes effort, and like I said, we're not perfect, right? We're all human, and I don't always do everything I could do on a daily basis, but I still try my best. And more than that, it's definitely more than trying your best. You definitely have to put your heart into it, and you have to develop a passion for it. And I think that's what network marketing has allowed me to achieve. It's allowed me to achieve a better standard in my life of my own self-image and a better income level and knowledge of how to build a business and so much more. It just keeps giving back. It's awesome. It's really an awesome form of business.